Alright, we're good to go. So how's everyone doing tonight? How's it going, Almond? I'm doing quite good, yeah. Today's a weird one. I think like 3 months ago or something, I was drunk and belligerent in the politically provoked server, and I challenged somebody to a debate where I didn't know the topic, and I said I'd still win, so should be fun. Oh dear, YouTube is not maintaining enough video to maintain smooth streaming, so that'll be laggy, which will be fun. I wonder if that is just shitty Wi-Fi, and it's not like, you know, an actual problem. That would be a fun one. I do love drunk driving debates. And the man, the myth, the legend, Zippy is here. How's it going, mate? I'm feeling hungry because I've only had one thing to eat today, and it was Marmite on toast. And that's about it, so I suppose I'll be hungry for action here. Hold on. There's my brother. I'm not aware of him ever saying that, no. Isn't there that martial art where it's like you're made to look drunk, and then it like throws the other guy off? I assume that one. We're starting in 5 minutes. So the politically provoked server itself isn't necessary these days, and probably not the best idea because it gets banned like every fucking 5 days or so, and you might go down with it. But if you go on the actual politics server, like discord.gg/politics, they have a section on there where you can do all the stuff, and that's far less likely to get banned. Actually, so that ends the chat real quick. So that's the thing, Svatwello. This is a secret topic. I think I was drunk and belligerent in the politically provoked server a few months ago, and I challenged him. I said I could beat him on a debate, even if I didn't know the topic. And here we are. Yep, secret. I wonder if I throw down the resolution a little bit, it might improve the buffering. Hopefully that doesn't break everything. Well, I'll be back in a second because I'm going to throw down the resolution to 720p, so I got to stop streaming for a second, but the stream page should stay up. I'll just go dark. Alright, and we're back. Hopefully this will sort the buffering out a little bit. I know it's screaming at me for having the wrong resolution, oh well. Should probably actually move this a little bit. Yeah, that seems... Let's do it like that. There we go, that'll be a little better. And I've also got this thing. I don't know if it'll work, I'll try it out now. This will be fun. Yeah, this should pop up on the actual thing. Well, that doesn't seem to have worked. It's supposed to be a thing where I can select little chat messages and they'll fly up onto the screen. Is that okay on the buffering then? Okay, so that's good. Do it like this. There we go. I think that should be good to go. This starts 1 minute ago. So I'll call him now. this guy picks up, or else he'll be a fucking bust. Well, he didn't pick up. If the topic is something we both agree on, I suppose I can just throw something random out there and I'm sure we'll find something. And you are right, that is most of Politically Provoked's fan base, judging by the votes. Alright, let's just... Look at this. I assume he's going to show up then, because he said, hey, let's go in 8 minutes. Hopefully he's probably just like taking a piss or something. But what to do in the meantime, eh? That's the question. Let's actually just... get some better lighting as well. Here we go. This will be fun. Oh yeah, we're supposed to have Cars. I think I asked Carson to be mod. Hold on, let me switch back to Carson.
What's up?
Hi there.
All right, so are we doing this with or without a moderator? Either option's fine.
I'm fine with either. I've just asked the mod whether he's still down for it, and he's not responding, so I assume we can just start without.
Okay, let me just allow that for a second. So, the impromptu topic I wanted to talk about was, in a hypothetical Ancapistan society, who runs the courts?
Alright, so it would be just, you know, if I was Johnson & Johnson and I wanted to start a courthouse, I would just go get a brick and mortar, I suppose. Let people come in if they have disputes, and just arbitrate that way. It's private arbitration. You still there? Hello?
You still there?
Yeah. Did I cut out or did you cut out?
I cut out for a second.
Alright.
So yeah, like, I'm sorry, could you just reiterate that for a second?
Yeah, sure. So the people in Ancap who would run the courts would be just whoever the fuck wants to be a judge or who wants to arbitrate between two people. There wouldn't be like restrictions on who would be allowed to do that. It'd just be up to the market.
Okay, so like the arbitration courts and the people that rule on the non-aggression principle in Ancapistan, are these private shareholder corporations typically?
I mean, that would be depending on what happened, right? I mean, probably you'd expect to see it would be the same as other industries, if it tended to be the case when you have shareholders in other industries. If that's true, then I don't see why that wouldn't carry on to arbitration, stuff like that. But, ultimately it'd be up to the market to decide.
Okay, up to the market to decide. So the ultimate problem
Oh, hold on.
I find okay.
Mods just said.
Are you like messaging him now?
Yeah, he just messaged me back.
All right.
I mean,
also, can you see me? Because my camera is buffering.
I just like I put your thing into like a pop-out window and took it off the stream in case
Okay.
you didn't want to be seen on stream.
Whatever's fine.
I'll just keep it as it is then.
All right.
Yeah, I suppose we can just continue without moderator if we've already started. All right, so yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, it would be shareholders if that's the way that turned out to be profitable. Then a company might decide to do that.
All right. And from empirical literature, at least in a liberal, democratic, like as markets exist now, like slight market regulation, but other than really bad shit, corporations can like invest in things at their liberty. So what did what I wanted to ask you is, in a hypothetical scenario, say I was the majority shareholder in one of these court firms, these litigation firms, and I was the biggest one. My company was the biggest one. If I am the majority shareholder with the most controlling voting shares in the biggest law firm or court firm in Ancapistan, does that mean I could just evade justice because I own
I
the
don't see what you
biggest
could.
company?
Because I mean, like, if I had a dispute with you, I don't know why the fuck I would go to your court.
Wait, so like, okay, okay, so I'm assuming in Ancapistan, the cops somehow get a hold of me, and I get transferred to my own um, court corporation.
I mean, that would depend entirely on what the crime was, right? I don't see why the cops would need to, get you if for every single crime, right? If like, let's say you played music too loud and I wanted you to stop playing music too loud, I don't think the cops would immediately fucking grab you and throw you into a cage. I think that would be a bit of an unnecessary response there. It would be entirely up to, I suppose, the covenant rules there. Like, you know.
Uh, yeah, you're saying I guess the covenant rules. So, in a hypothetical scenario, if the covenant rules decree that the majority shareholder has total ownership over that legal litigation firm, doesn't that mean I could like use my authority and my power to just get myself out of whatever situation because I own the courts, right?
Do you want all the courts in that covenant?
Um, I own the majority of shares in the biggest court.
But then why would I just if I had a dispute with you, right? Let's say we both, we're neighbors or something. I want to use the fence that separates us. I want to tear it down. You want to keep it upright. We have some sort of conflict like that. Why would I say, yeah, I'll agree to go to the court that you run? Why wouldn't I say, no, 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 I'm going to a court that neither of us run, a neutral court?
That's an interesting thing. Who determines which court I go to?
We both agree to go to a given court if we wanted to arbitrate.
Wait, okay, so like, yeah, so in a hypothetical scenario, we both agree that I have committed a crime and I'm going to my own court.
Why would I agree to that?
Or would I guess like if you're being stupid or didn't realize.
Sure, yeah. If
So
I agree to go to your court and they rule in your favor, I think I've kind of that's kind of my own fault there.
yeah, so like, where is your say in this? Like, okay, you're saying the most deciding factor in this is who chooses where I get to go. So like, I agree to go. I have my half of the bargain to go to a certain court. Oh, like where do you come up in this?
Well, if we want to arbitrate, we both have to agree which court to go to, or else we can't arbitrate, right? To arbitrate, you need to both agree to a court.
Yeah.
So we'd both have to agree. So that's where my say comes in. It's equal to your say because we both need a court. I suppose maybe if you were willing to pay me a bunch of money to go to your court,
Now,
then I'd agree to that, right? But we both have to agree.
but what if I don't agree to going to any other court of my own? Like, I only want to go to my own court.
Well,
That
then,
I just happen to.
then we're stuck
That
with
I
war.
just so coincidentally happen to own the majority of shares in.
Then we'd be stuck with war because we wouldn't be able to agree how to arbitrate. So I'd have my security firm. They'd try to arrest you, and if you owned a security firm because you're like Mr. Bigwig, you'd probably try and protect yourself, and then we'd have war, right? Like that's all we're
Yeah.
left with. Like I don't deny that battles could happen, right? I just deny that they would be very common. I don't think there'd be a tendency towards it. Hopper makes this point in Democracy, the God That Failed, that democracies actually have an incentive to go to war. All states have an incentive to try and expand their territory, right? But democracy specifically, they need to have war all the time to keep functioning. So, but in a free market, if you, Mr. Bigwig, if you went to war with my security firm, you would lose a hell of a lot of money. You might even end up losing your life. Like, you could lose everything. That is a huge gamble to play, and nobody's going to want to do business with you if they know you're just if you're just running a raving band of, like, bandits going around, right? Nobody wants to do business with the bandits. I mean, some people do, but they're less likely to want to do business with the bandits than the business gentlemen down the road, right?
Yeah. So, like, there was a lot in that specific point. But going back to what you said about there being war between us because it's like a sort of business rivalry and I'm not agreeing to anything else but my own court. Do you see why Ancap is frangible? Because
Frangible.
I'm a majority shareholder. Like I have committed a serious offense, for like malleable, breakable, easily breakable. I have committed a serious offense, and as a business owner, I'm not agreeing to go to any court other than my own for trial, and that's war. Like, do you see that fundamental problem with Ancapistan?
No, this is a problem existing in every single system, right? If you're going to have some top level arbitration apparatus, right? You'll have a hierarchy of arbitration basically. You have all the bottom level arbitrators who like may have all agreements to go to one level up, and they all have agreements to go to one level up, and eventually you're going to get to like the top guy, right? Who is the top level arbitration, and you can't get any further beyond that. If two top level arbitrators have a dispute and they can't be forced to go to anybody else, right? Then yeah, they all that is left is war. This is
Yeah.
true of all systems. It's true of the state as well. If you decided that you didn't care about any of the laws apart from your own laws, your own quote unquote laws, because I believe in natural law theory, uh, you believe in your own quote unquote laws, that you think you should be allowed to murder and nobody else should, and you're not willing to go to anybody's court except for the court run by you, then yeah, we're forced to go to war over that because I don't want to be murdered anymore. So I'm forced to war with you. That's true of literally every system.
Yeah. So, okay, if law goes up, okay, like when in law, people's lives are on the line, and even if it's like the pettiest offense, going to jail for even a defined period of time, people do absolutely not want that. So I know majority shareholders in certain corporations are very rare. Like shares are divvied across many investors, especially when they like are in serious need of capital. But do you see how powerful people, and yes, war is true of every system, but do you see how powerful people not wanting to face justice, very bad actors, I might add, how this is very easily conducive to war?
Mm, I mean, they'd only go to war if they wanted to fucking like lose basically all their fortune. Like war is very expensive, and war is not an easy thing to do. It's basically only the state that is able to go to war. Because if I'm a profit-driven entity and I start like lobbing bombs at another person, I'm very quickly gonna lose a lot of my fucking money. I'm gonna lose a lot of my influence. It's the idea that in a free market, the psychopaths, the most powerful, high-level individuals, the people who are gonna not take any shit and gonna fuck everybody over. The way they quote unquote fuck people over
Yep.
is by actually helping them. If they want to have the most benefit to themselves, it's not by going around stabbing people and all that shit, right? It's by in fact helping other people. And when you help another person, you get that mutual benefit, this mutual benefit in trade. That's why the free market is so, one of the reasons why it's so fucking brilliant.
So the only MO in which people have to save their profits is by helping people.
Well, I mean, you could also make money by attacking people, but that's just not a very efficient way to do things. This is the division of labor here.
What do
You're,
like okay, I can bring up a few examples. Actually, what okay, like I was gonna bring up the example of Halliburton, Raytheon, like all these companies, but they actually rely on contracts, so that example would be null. Like, how would a defense company? This also plays into the question of like private police and I guess like armies. How would police and armies generally make money? Like, I know you're gonna bring up the free market, but what force in the market is gonna
well,
provide
everybody,
them with that?
they would both come under the umbrella of what David Friedman refers to as a rights enforcement agency. So they are dealing with the enforcement of rights. That's broadly what police and military are intended to do, right? If we're taking a really generous approach to the concept, right? They are supposed to enforce your rights. So I think most people want to have their rights enforced. I certainly do. So I'd be willing to pay for that. And therefore, there's a gap in the market. If you're like a big, strong guy, and I'm just a little weak guy, and I say, hey, there's some slightly bigger guys than me, but very much smaller than you, and I want you to walk behind me so that they don't want to attack, because they know that if they attack me, you're gonna fucking, grab them by the skull and start smashing them together, right? Like and then you can make
Yeah.
money that way.
So the people of Ancapistan, just to elucidate this, the people of Ancapistan hire the defense firms to defend them.
I imagine they would. And you could probably also, come up with neighborhood organizations where, hey, neighbor, if I see somebody who's trying to like break into your house, I'm going to go out there with my long gun and I'm going to scare them off, right? You could have that sort of thing. You could have mutual aid organizations set up where they would deal with it, like, a fraternal society, you pay monthly dues to the fraternal society, and the fraternal society provides defense and protection for you. Right? You could do all sorts of crazy things. That's the market is very diverse. Just as, if you were to ask me,
Like, okay,
how would food be provided in the free market? Well, there'd be restaurants, there'd be farmers markets, there'd be fucking, you could farm your own food, right? It's so diverse.
well, I don't disagree that the market is very diverse in what it has to offer people. Like, and there's a lot of competition, but the main tribulation of private police firms and private defense firms is that they can be easily corrupted by bad actors with a lot of money. And I think you agree that even in this society, with as much market regulations as we have, there are still bad apples with tons and tons of disposable income to invest in large corporations that do not want just outcomes but only care about furthering their own power. So if I own the police, if I own one of three of these things, police, the military, the courts, do you see how that's very easily conducive to war?
I mean, you said there that, like, private firms are easily corrupted, and even with all these regulations, you still have massive corporations corrupting. Did you ever ask yourself whether it's precisely those restrictions on the market that allow such a thing to happen? How exactly would private firms be easily corrupted? And moreover, how could they be more easily corrupted than our status system? Because we're comparing the two, right? Because neither are perfect. Neither are perfect adherence to natural law. I agree with that. There would be
Yes.
Conflict in Ancapistan, but still, how would it be easier to corrupt a private firm than a state-owned firm? Let's say.
Easier to. I don't know how we would quantify it being easier to corrupt a. Like, I don't know how you can quantify that,
Well,
but
I could give you
we
one
need.
way.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have a state monopoly grant, I only have to corrupt one firm. I have to corrupt the monopoly. If I want to commit crimes in New York City, I just have to pay off the NYPD. They won't come after me anymore, and then I'm Gucci, right? Because they have a monopoly grant. Nobody else is allowed to be the police in New York.
Yes. And which is why I think we need, because I am for the preservation of a state system, we need much more stringent regulations on, like, where money is going, who the hell is involved, and we like need highly stringent 24/7 regulation. I go on the websites Open Secrets and Follow the Money .coms all the time to see like who are the, I guess, metaphorical shareholders in senators and representatives in Congress and former and current presidents, like, because I want to see who's buying them out, you know. And I think some onus lies on the people in knowing about this potential corruption that could manifest in giving them so much money in campaign contributions. But here's what I want to emphasize. Even though the state is corruptible, I think in an ideal society, there should be full transparency on, even fuller transparency on who is trying to corrupt the state and like how it, in what ways it's corrupted. I think the state is a good mediator of corporate corruption. I think if we crack down on who are legitimately malicious actors in business, then we would have a fair society. And I think if the people gained more transparency into the corruptions of the state, then we would have a fair society.
You
Like,
know,
what's your contention with that?
so like there's this video by John Stossel where he's looking at the regulations in, can't remember which country it was. It was somewhere in Africa, sub-Saharan, and I think it was called Made in Medi. The documentary he was talking about, where there's this lady. She was trying to export like lipsticks and perfumes and stuff, and the amount of regulation she needed, she actually had to. She was lucky that she was even able to do it, because she, got a bureaucrat who was sympathetic to her, and he helped her out. And most of the time, she would have to bribe someone. And the saying is, what she said there was, people talk about corruption like it's a problem in and of itself, but it's not. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of these strangling regulations. If I have to go through a single guy to get my license to be allowed to be a clown, say, and clown licenses are a thing, you'll get arrested in the US if you are an unlicensed clown. I'm obviously going to have to bribe that guy. Just make it worth my while. Whereas in a free market, I don't really know what free market corruption would look like. And I suppose to grease the wheels a little bit here, you said we need more stringent regulations, and who is making the regulations, and why would you trust? Because if it's the state making the regulations, why would you trust them to regulate themselves in any sort of reasonable way?
Well, that's the faith we put in the state. And the solution to state corruption is greater laws of transparency as to who is being bought out, who is being bribed, who is being conned, tricked, coalesced into this decadence and this corruption. Now, states, so long as they're in liberal republics, are democracies. And in that way, the people have their own leverage, their own populist leverage against who gets elected, who gets appointed, and if they're dissatisfied with the decision an elected representative makes, then they can oust them from office via pressuring their elected officials. Now, when it comes to corruption of the state, because they are supposed to be a mediator of corporate conflict, yeah, we absolutely need greater transparency in the state, which is why I want them to, what's the legal term I'm looking for? Assange. It's not
Whistleblower?
acquittal.
Amnesty?
Well, that's what he is, but that's a word people have been applying. Exonerate. That's what I'm looking for. I want them to exonerate him of his perceived crimes, because I believe that full transparency into what the state is doing, especially when it comes to bribes and communications, should be at the forefront of a liberal democracy. And that's how we monitor what the state is doing to ensure that they provide the best results of regulating corporations. But what I want you to describe to me is how correlatively less regulation would make corporations less corrupt.
Well, I would just point out who's making all the regulation. It's always the state. You're saying you want just the good regulation. You want the transparency regulations, right? But again, who's making those regulations? If Nancy Pelosi has a bill before her desk, right, this is a new regulation where it will limit your power and it will make everybody see the dirty dealings that you're doing, she's going to go, veto. Why the fuck would she ever accept that bill? Why would other congressmen ever make that bill unless you're like a Ron Paul type? And just you don't get many Ron Paul types in Congress, let me tell you. It's Hopper's saying is, if
no, there are no libertarians in Congress.
Yeah, there's. Rand Paul,
go
kinda,
ahead. Yeah,
right? Yeah,
just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's my point, right? It's
he's more of a neocon, I'd say. He's not as libertarian.
Yeah, he's not as good as his father. But it's how would less regulation make corporations less, mean, evil, and all these things? Well, I don't. Corporation, really, the root of the word is corpse, and it's because it's an organ of the state. So it's if you have no state, you have no corporations really. You might have firms and stuff. That's why I use the word firm more often. But like a corporation is generally seen as an entity which is lobbying the state and is getting money back from that lobbying. It's like this back and forth trade of money. That's what like defines a corporation in my view. But I mean, like if you just mean by that large firms, well, I mean we have the Hayekian knowledge problem, the economic calculation problem, which limits the size of firms naturally.
Hold on a sec. I want to just get something.
As in, like, I think he left. Well, not the call, obviously, but I think he's actually walked away and got like a sandwich or something. Yeah, I find that a lot with these people. They're like very concerned about large firms and like monopolies and stuff. And then they're like, oh, well, I'll tell you the great way to fucking solve that. I'm talking about Lord Villain's comment here, by the way. Oh, I know the way to solve the market's monopolization and huge firms. Let's just farm a huge monopoly, and they get to say what everybody else is allowed to do. It seems kind of ridiculous to me. It's always the case with these people, though. Yeah, this guy is more pleasant than apolitical because this guy isn't
Okay,
like complete nihilist. Oh, here we go. You're back.
Let me get.
I was complimenting you.
Fired back.
I said you aren't as horrible as apolitical because you're not a complete fucking nihilist douchebag.
Is apolitical the moderator?
No, he's apolitical teen. He's a guy who I debated a while ago, and he refused to bite the bullet that slavery is a bad thing. So.
Okay, yeah, that. Wait, are you like streaming now?
Yeah, I'm streaming.
Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah. Slavery is objectively bad.
Yeah.
So on your point, about Nancy Pelosi vetoing a more stringent regulation, and like it's pretty prescient. Well, I guess this is in the future, but it's pretty prescient that you bring up Nancy Pelosi as an example, because like a couple days ago, her inner I guess neoliberal ended up showing when she said, like a journalist brought up the fact that so many senators were in violation of the Stock Act, and she like suddenly did a 180 on all of her policies and said, "Well, we live in a free market, and you know we can do whatever you want." I honestly think politicians should be able to own stock, just not insider trade. And it really just goes to shows the inconsistency and her just like doing a complete 180 and betraying her policies, which Manchin and Cinema have patently done. Anyway, that was a little ranty of me.
I mean, it's the whole rule for thee, not for me. That's what I'm saying. That's the whole thing with the state. They love to tell you what to do, but you don't get to tell them what to do.
Yeah, like, which is why I'm here's what I wanted to get at, and we might agree on this. Like, a lot of apathy about market deregulation, or yeah, I guess apathy about market regulations in general and the laws passed pertaining to them fall on the people's awareness and consciousness of what is happening in legislation. They ultimately blame the people for not like having enough of a mindful presence, like a thought about who is actually playing with their lives, which pawns are being moved in which spaces, and whose kings and queens are being captured by their opponents. Like, because Nancy Pelosi, the people have regulation, have some sort of leverage in a liberal democratic polity. And if Pelosi vetoes a position she has historically promised in the past, then I think her constituents should be up in arms about that. They should be absolutely trying to eviscerate her political career for betraying them so heavily. And the worst part about corporate corruption is that many Americans, I don't know if you're American or not, many Americans just don't give a fuck about the fact that their politicians, their representatives are being bought out by these rich cocksuckers who only give a fuck about procuring their own profits. So I think the onus actually lies on the people to have enough of a consciousness to address their representatives' betrayal of what populist thought wants. I know there was a lot there, but in summary, would you agree that it's the people's fault for not having as much of an awareness as they should about who's being bought out?
I disagree that it's the people's fault. I think most people, they're what I refer to as brainworms. They don't actually think for themselves. They don't actually have their own thoughts. They basically just copy thoughts from other people and pretend that they're their own, right? They don't actually. They are the people who are led rather than lead, right? And these are the people who they're just herded between various ideologies by various different vanguards, and they conglomerate around the status quo, essentially. And what I blame there is the corporate press for leading these people into an absolute mind rot ideology of just like whatever the government says is alright, you know? I mean, I could just as easily flip this on you. It's your fault for not being an anarchist, right? For not hating the true enemy, the state. That's the true enemy. I mean, you say, well, but we're in a liberal democracy, so the people have their own say. I mean, what kind of a say do you get in a democracy? Do you think that's like a just say? If 9 of my neighbors want my house, do they get my house all of a sudden?
So are you saying the problem with certain people being led by vanguardist entities is the state causing these problems, or the corporate media and what they're feeding them? Or do you think it's just a lack of them getting invested in their political opinions?
I think there are some people who just aren't predispositioned. They just aren't physically capable of truly, I mean, I can say that, but I mean, Jordan Peterson was once a brainworm. He explains his maps of meaning, but he grew out of it. So I mean, maybe it is on people to grow out of their wormhood. But I mean, like, they're a brainworm. You can't expect them to come to that conclusion on their own. And it's the corporate media who are constantly feeding people mind-numbing shit, right?
Yeah, well, so does the fault here lie on corporations for them
No,
not getting
it's a very
their
light
political
fault.
opinions explicated enough?
It's a very light fault, and I lay it on the corporate press. So when I talk about corporate press, there, I'm borrowing a mannerism from Michael Malice there. So that's what I call the mainstream media, as some people would call it. I don't think we should call them the mainstream media, though. I call them the corporate press, because that's what they are.
Yeah, and it's because, like, many of the most successful and popular news organizations aren't actually looking for world events or like what is happening socio-politically, economically, sociologically, what paradigm shifts are happening. They care about content that's packaged in a not tabloid way, but content that's packaged in a professional way. And like, you blame their procuring and refinement of juicy happenings, uh, like as the source of the American population's misdirection?
Well, I don't really
Would you
care
blame that?
much about the, procurement of juicy happenings or anything like that. I care about their essentially monopoly grants that they are provided. They are just, the state just ousts everybody else and keeps them as the media. You know, there are so many regulations on fucking, I can't start up a pirate radio station, I'll get fucking jailed. I can't fucking have my own like alternative news station. There are like, the reason why there are like 3 fucking internet providers and 2 fucking cable news providers, right? Cable providers, right? Is because I'm not allowed to just lay down some fucking cable and start connecting my neighbors' houses up. I'm not allowed to do that.
Okay, so here's where my inner, I mean, not even libertarian, I guess, however you want to put it. I am for, like, incentivizing market competition via contracts, rewards. So if, like, this is what happened with the COVID vaccine. So the government incentivized the production of a vaccine, or at least a medication that would combat COVID-19 as it existed then. I think that's a pretty good idea to stir up competition in markets where there is a ton of demand for a certain product. Whether that's libertarian or Keynesian, I don't know. But in that way, I want to foster competition. Like, there are pretty much, I get only a few social media corporations. I think the big ones are Twitter, Facebook, and Google, which is pretty much YouTube in their assets. And I want to actually like incentivize, or i.e. fund, alt tech corporations to, you know, have some like actual discourse in the market. I don't think you agree with that because that is technically state intermingling, but it's a way to incentivize competition and eliminate triopolies or oligopolies, I guess.
Like, this is a situation of, you know, you can always oversupply a good. If, you know, if we're looking at Gregor's, my name is Gregor, by the way, Gregor's High Five Business Co. And then you start saying, right, this guy's fucking, he's providing too many high fives. But, like, you know, there's only enough, people only really want my high fives, right? They just, there isn't really a market demand for that many more high fives. There isn't a market demand for a hacker's high five. You try to start your own high five Inc. and you fail because people are like, nah, I'm already getting my high fives from this guy over here, right? You know, and then the state comes in and says, don't worry, we're going to pay you to be a high five business, even if you don't get the customers. And then suddenly you start giving out high fives. Emo Hoppy in chat, he starts giving out high fives. Zippy, he starts giving out high fives. Everybody's giving out high fives instead of doing the other things they would have done. Maybe Zippy Curve, he's a successful drummer, right? He plays the drums. That's what he does. Instead of playing the drums, he's fucking off and doing high fives to people. You know, we get less drumming that way. You know, Connell, maybe he's like a doctor or something. He's there doing brain surgery. And he's like, hold on, why am I doing brain surgery here? I could be out giving high fives and I get money. Yeah, let's give us some high fives. So suddenly all the other industries are starting to suffer. You can't just allocate towards a single industry in a vacuum and not affect anything else. You gotta allocate as the market wants to allocate. Otherwise, you're oversupplying high fives.
No, yeah, I think you missed something there. It's incentivizing market competition in which there is already a demand for a hypothetical
But how do you
product.
know there's demand?
Um, well,
If there's
okay,
truly demand,
I'll
then
go back
people
to
will
my
fill
example.
they'll fill the void. If there's demand, entrepreneurs will come along and go, hey, I think there's a lot more demand for high fives than there currently is supply for high fives. I think I could make a lot of money by doing a high five business here. And then they'd go out and start giving high fives to people. And then they'd get money. They'd get rewarded for finding this
I'll
gap in the market. But the state can't just peer down and figure out where there is demand. It's entrepreneurial. You need entrepreneurs to do this. This is the job of the entrepreneur, to find where there are gaps in the market and to fill them. And they get rewarded for filling them, just by filling them.
um Well, no, okay. So, like, I'll default to my vaccine example. There didn't exist a tangible COVID-19 vaccine before the government incentivized competition, but there was a heavy demand, aggregate demand or something that could procure the spread of COVID-19. And because there was such a high demand for it, and people needed it so bad because they were really afraid of this virus, that would be, I think, a just example of the state stepping in to incentivize competition in an area where there didn't exist a product yet. But
And again, like, were they oversupplying that then? Were there doctors who could have been curing cancer who instead were making a vaccine? Right? You can oversupply anything. Anything that people want, you can oversupply it. Let's take an example like food. Everybody's suddenly making food. Uh-oh. Nobody's making water. Nobody's driving any cars. Nobody's doing any transport or anything. Everybody dies. When you do 100% of GDP towards anything, even something which every single living person basically wants, you can still oversupply it. You can oversupply anything.
what? How would there be like? Do you think there was an oversupply of COVID vaccine?
If you're subsidizing it, yes. Ceteris paribus, more people will want to produce it than would otherwise.
Well, what's the fundamental problem with that?
The fundamental problem with it is they're not producing what they really ought to be producing. Like, for example, there might have been doctors who were they were about to operate on somebody's brain, take out a cancer tumor and save their life, but they're like, hold on, I could be making a lot of money by making COVID vaccine right now. Alright, fellas, let's pop off to the pub and figure out how to make a vaccine here. You know, and then suddenly the guy with cancer dies, right? It's an extreme example, but that's the point that I'm making. Those guys could have been doing other things. They should be doing what the market actually wants, not what the state thinks the market wants.
The market wanted. No. Okay.
No. You're about to say the market wanted vaccines.
If
If they wanted vaccines, then people would be willing to put up their own money for it, and entrepreneurs would go, "There's a huge gap in the market here. I'm going to fund it off my own pocket, and I'll get rewarded if I'm right that there's a gap in the market here." Whereas the state just says, I reckon there's probably a gap in the market there. Let's just fund it. And if we're wrong, doesn't matter. It'll still happen. And people will be drawn away from other things towards this. I mean, for all we know, there could have been a cure for cancer now if we hadn't had all this vaccine funding. There could have been.
Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson did see substantial funding from the private sector to develop this vaccine, especially in terms of bonds.
More than otherwise, when there's a subsidy. Do you understand what I'm saying there? They would have allocated more means than they would have otherwise allocated towards the production of vaccines when there's a subsidy.
And the private sector did. But here's what
the private sector might have allocated N, and then with the private sector plus the subsidy, they allocate N plus X, right? And that plus X, that is the difference there that I am concerned about. That is where, you know, they could have allocated towards the cure for cancer, the cure for AIDS, all these other things that the market might want a lot more than a vaccine for COVID. That is possible. But they didn't allocate towards that. They allocated towards COVID instead of the things they should have been allocating towards.
Okay, cancer and AIDS aren't global pandemics.
Irrelevant.
The reason there was such a high demand... No, well, I think it is relevant because it pertains to the demand of a COVID treatment.
But the demand already existed in the market. The state just guessed that the demand was higher than it actually was. They just guessed. They didn't know. They're not entrepreneurs. They're not betting with their own money. They're not getting rewarded by it. They're just guessing.
But don't you think... Okay, don't you think the state budget is somewhat technocratic in how it spends its money? Like, they do hire economists, right?
Stupid economists. Keynesian quote-unquote economists, you know. Fucking communists.
Based. It's like in the politically provoked healthcare debate. Everybody to the left of you is a commie.
Yeah, they're fucking commies. What do you want me to lie? Say they're not commies?
Like, I want you to debate a tanky so bad.
Yeah, they're also
the
commies.
Whole state ownership people. Okay, there's a substantial difference between, like, a Marxist communist and a Marxist
I know,
Leninist
but they're all
communist.
fucking
And
pinkos.
okay, sure, I'll make that concession. Anyway, let's get back to state-made demand. There was already um a substantial demand for a COVID
Okay.
treatment
And then
in
entrepreneurs
the
can
market,
fill that demand. Can they not?
but they needed to get it out faster than the private sector would have gotten it
Okay,
out.
so you think
Like, yeah,
that you
you can
can
get
oversupply that,
plenty
can you
of money.
not? What if they got it out too fast? That's possible, right? If they allocated 100% of
Okay,
means towards getting out a COVID vaccine as fast as possible, they might have got it out in a week. But in that week, nobody made any food, and suddenly you have mass starvation on your hands. You could get it out too fast. That's an oversupply.
in what way were the COVID vaccines specifically as a product oversupplied?
In the way that they're subsidized. That means there's an oversupply. I.e., you're supplying more than the market wanted to supply. Quote unquote wanted, because the market's not a guy, right?
Yeah, like the market is made up of people. Like, is there a way to quantify? I guess you could do it in terms of money.
I
Is
think
there
it's
a way you
ordinal.
specifically quantify how much the market
I don't
wants
need
a
to
product?
quantify it. This is a priori true. When you, this is the definition of an oversupply, right? Because let's imagine, right? Let's ignore all this COVID stuff because there's a lot of emotions there, right? Let's just look at corn production. Let's say,
Yeah, I don't want to get you demonetized for you.
let's just say, like, there is 5 bushels of corn. That is what is currently being produced by the free market in Ruritania, right? In Ruritania, they produce 5 bushels of corn per annum, right? But then the state says, hey, we'll pay everybody who produces corn $5,000. And then suddenly the rate goes up to 10,000 bushels of corn per annum. Clearly, because, clearly people are going to want to produce corn more when they're getting paid for it by the state. They don't have to sell it. So when you have a subsidy, you get more of that thing than you otherwise would. Do you agree with that?
Not in every instance. The
Okay,
reason
right. What
government
instance wouldn't
subsidy,
you get more production than you otherwise would with a subsidy?
I guess in the example, I don't know. Let me just concede that right off the bat. But here's what I wanted to
And
mention.
that is an oversupply, right? Because you're getting more than the market actually demanded. Supply is no longer meeting demand. Supply is way outstripping demand. It is tending not towards equilibrium. It is tending towards some point above equilibrium. It is trying to satisfy the new subsidized amount. I don't know which curve you're shifting, but you're shifting one of the curves. That's what economists always say. Right?
Okay. If the state predicted the amount
How would they predict this?
that the market relatively wanted,
How would they predict that?
I guess like technocratic calculations and
I
like
don't think
seeing
the
aggregate
economy
demand
is
for a product.
mathematics. I'm a mathematics student, by the way. I don't think mathematics applies to economics. So, I'm
You
wholly
don't.
biased towards mathematics. I love mathematics. I think it's the greatest fucking thing ever. I think mathematics cannot hope to model economics in any sort of way which is even slightly relevant. I think it completely misses the point to try and use mathematics when it comes to econ.
Well, okay. Do you think economics are an empirical science?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Let's get back to the um, vaccine example. So the reason there is a government subsidy into markets, especially in desperate times of need, is because the private sector can't get it out fast enough. It's
But you
less
can
an
get out too
issue
fast,
of
right?
capital raise.
You could get it out too fast, as I explained.
I don't think the COVID vaccine got it out too fast. I don't think the
I
COVID
mean, that's just
vaccine
your
got out fast
thoughts.
enough.
That's just your thoughts, right? How do you know
Yeah,
that?
it's relative. It's relative.
But how do you know that? Are you just guessing?
No, yeah, it's absolutely my personal opinion. I think tons of lives could have been saved from the wrath of
But
SARS-CoV-2
if
had
you
the
did it
vaccine
too
gotten out
fast,
fast
right,
enough.
they might have died from other causes. They might have starved to death because you had everybody making COVID vaccines for a week or a month or a year, however long it took. And they weren't making food and shit like
How would
that.
they starve to death because
Because
people
they
are
weren't making
making
food and
COVID?
shit.
Well,
You were
people
allocating
that work in the
from
food
other
industry.
industries that people do want stuff from. You're taking people out of those industries and putting them towards making coronavirus vaccines. You're taking them away from those. You can't just say, right, we're increasing the number of coronavirus vaccines in a vacuum. You can't just do that. You have to take from elsewhere.
Well, we're taking from government subsidies. Oh, okay.
Yes,
So
yes, which
yeah,
is coming out
like
of
we're not.
taxation. You're
No,
taking
no,
from
we're not.
elsewhere.
We're not allocating people from other industries
Of
into
course
the
you are.
industry of
You
virology.
you are making a false demand in that industry. You are making it such that right people that industry that you're subsidizing is no longer tending towards equilibrium, which is what the market does. The market tends towards equilibrium where supply meets demand. Right, that is what the market does. Instead, when you have a subsidy, it is tending towards some point above equilibrium. It is trying to get to a higher price than equal. Sorry, not a higher price. It is trying to up supply more than equilibrium. Than the equilibrium point, it is tending away from equilibrium towards a higher supply than necessary, an oversupply. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick, but I'll be back in a second.
Oh yeah.
All right, I'm back. You still there? Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
So yes. So what I said in repudiation to your statement is that the private sector had enough to develop a vaccine in and of itself, but they did not have enough funds to mobilize it fast enough to cater the demand to market need. Like, it was an issue of timeliness, not the ability to develop a vaccine. People in 2020 were like dropping like I guess wildfire drying. They were dying by precipitous amounts. So the reason the government stepped in is because of timeliness, not of the ability and demand to develop a vaccine, right?
I mean, yeah, they always had the ability to do it, but they were better spending those resources elsewhere. That's what I'm saying. They had the means to do it. Of course they did. They did it. But those means are better allocated elsewhere, not towards vaccines.
Well, no, I think this is a philosophical bend between us because
It's
people
nothing to do
were
with that. It's
dying.
pure economics.
Well, no, I no. Here's what the philosophical bend I want to highlight for a second. I think your position is that they they could have allocated resources elsewhere. The state could have, but I think it was overall beneficial for the state to allocate resources to the COVID vaccine when they did, because we needed to get that out as fast as possible, right? Because people were dying, and the market needed and wanted an effective preventative measure for COVID. We've also seen this with the Merck pill. I think Pfizer also has like an antiviral pill. Yeah.
No, my position is not that the state could have allocated those funds elsewhere. I don't want the state at all. I'm saying that those companies could have allocated them elsewhere. If there wasn't a subsidy on producing a COVID vaccine, they would have allocated fewer resources towards making a COVID vaccine. They could have allocated those towards making a cancer cure or an AIDS cure or something like that.
But the reason they allocated it to COVID specifically is because COVID was killing people faster than cancer and AIDS had combined
Irrelevant.
on average in 2020.
They allocated
Well, that's
too
why there was a
much.
higher market demand for it.
Okay, right. Do you disagree that if they allocated 100% of GDP towards making COVID vaccine, that would be too much, right?
100% is way too much. Yes.
Yeah. So it's clearly something less than 100%. So that amount less, that is what the market provides. That is equilibrium. That is the correct amount to allocate towards a coronavirus vaccine or to anything. That is the correct amount. And the free market tends towards equilibrium. A subsidized market tends towards the equilibrium plus whatever the subsidy is. So it's not tending towards equilibrium.
What I'm trying to get you to understand is that, like, there was no equilibrium. There was subsidy.
There was no
It was an
equilibrium. There's
issue
always an
of
equilibrium.
timeliness. It was
The
an
issue of timeliness is irrelevant. You're tending towards some point that is not equilibrium. You're having an oversupply. I'm tending towards equilibrium, the correct
okay.
amount.
So do you agree that fundamentally in entrepreneurship, timing of when you release a solution to a problem will massively affect the impact that product has on consumers?
I have no clue what on
Do you
earth you
think
mean by that.
timeliness is important in selling products?
Like, releasing at a time when people want it?
Yeah, at the specific time the demand is highest.
I mean, if you release a
think
week
that
earlier,
affects-
you'd also fucking win. Like, you don't have to wait for the demand to get highest. You just release when you've got the fucking solution.
But they needed it as fast as possible because people were dying
you
off
release when you've got the
precipitously.
fucking solution. I don't think entrepreneurs are sitting there waiting for demand to peak and then they release. I don't think that's happening. They want to release as early as possible, and
they
then
got
they're getting all the people, right?
And they got the solution faster because of those subsidies, right?
Yes, they got it too fast. Because they allocated too many means towards the research of a COVID vaccine. And we both agree that if they had allocated 100% of GDP, they would have got it faster. That's correct. But we'd be starving to death. Oh, he's gone. Yeah, he did just say there was no equilibrium. I guess I could switch back to this for a bit. This one was fun.
I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, I had to urinate.
Sure.
Yeah, like I'd like to correct my statement in saying there was an equilibrium, but the reason it got out in a timely and efficient and um, overall better manner is because of the government subsidies. Had the government subsidies not been there, they would have developed the vaccine later. And developing the vaccine later would have resulted in more death because the
How do you
preventative
know
measure
that?
wouldn't have been there.
How do you know that they didn't reallocate away from the cancer cure and then we didn't get the cancer cure? We could have been living the cancer cure reality right now. Don't you hate cancer? That's the argument you're making here. Why don't we just allocate all the money towards a
I
cancer
hate
cure?
cancer.
Right? It's
I
because they
hate
can't.
cancer,
You
but
you don't
COVID.
deny that there can be an oversupply, and so what you need to prove now is that oh no, but it actually wasn't an oversupply, even when they were tending towards a point above equilibrium. That's what you have to prove.
No, I hate cancer, but COVID was killing people off in greater numbers and in faster time.
If
So
but if we
had
had
those
allocated
subsidies not,
all the means, 100% of GDP, towards finding a COVID cure, you agree that we'd have more deaths than otherwise, wouldn't you? Because people would starve to death. There wouldn't be any farming or anything like that.
I'd agree, but that would be
Yes,
stupid, and we didn't
exactly.
allocate 100%
So
of
how do you
GDP to
know that
that.
we wouldn't had that we didn't get more deaths? How do you know that we got more deaths than if we had, like how do you know that it was actually the right move to do to allocate towards coronavirus and that we didn't get more deaths that way?
As I've said, because COVID is the leading cause of deaths in America today.
Irrelevant.
Well, that's how we would have had less deaths if we
No,
had
how do you
gotten
know
it
that?
sooner.
That is not how. It can be the number one death. You can have two coronavirus deaths and one death from a car accident, right? And if you allocate 100% of the means towards COVID, you have one COVID death, one car accident death, and three deaths from starvation. You have more deaths that way, even though coronavirus is the leading cause of death.
Like, you would have to do a highly in-depth study to actually
No, no, no. I think even
empirically
with a highly
prove
in-depth
that that
study,
was
you
the.
cannot find this out. It's impossible because you cannot keep all else equal. You cannot keep ceteris paribus. That is the point of all science. That you have to keep all other variables equal. If I want to find out what effect I have some container and I want to up the pressure, I want to up the temperature, sorry, and see what effect that has on pressure. I can't up the temperature and also start passing an electric current through it because that might have a different effect. I'm changing multiple variables. You cannot keep all other variables equal in economics, which is why it's not empirical, which is why it's entirely deductive through praxeology.
So you think it's a more behavioral science? So okay, to prove to you, we would have had less deaths if we had allocated less to the COVID vaccine. I would have to rely on praxeology and like the study of human behavior to prove
I don't think you
what you wanted
could
me to.
prove it, is the point. Because I think you're
You said
wrong.
I have to rely on praxeology.
You have to make praxeologic arguments here, right? So I'm making a praxeologic argument that you are oversupplying the coronavirus vaccine when you subsidize it. You'd have to attack that through praxeology, yes.
I don't know how that would. Okay, so what do you want me to prove? Like, because I can't pull up like any praxeological study right now. Like me saying, I think we would have had greater deaths if the COVID vaccine had came out later is entirely speculative. I'll absolutely grant you that. Like I don't know empirically or praxeologically.
Yes, but I can prove a priori that is definitely the case that you're oversupplying something which you are subsidizing, right?
You consider an oversupply.
An oversupply is when the market is tending towards a point above the equilibrium. That is an oversupply. You're supplying more than there ought to be. You've shifted the demand curve.
Okay, no, it was an issue of timeliness. Like There was enough subsidies, even from the private sector, for these companies to develop a vaccine. However, the, it was an issue of timeliness, and we needed to get it out as fast as possible.
But how do you know that you didn't oversupply?
Don't.
You don't. So do you agree that you did oversupply?
Well, I just said we don't know if we oversupplied or not.
Well, we do know whether we
How would I
oversupplied because we
concede
are
that?
tending towards a point above equilibrium. You were tending towards a point where supply is more than it should be. Right?
More than it should be according to the will of the free market?
More than what it would be in a free market, in equilibrium. You're going above equilibrium.
Like, okay, actually, I don't know what, like, equilibrium, is that, like, the natural aggregate demand for something?
So equilibrium is the point where supply meets demand, where, like, you have completely, you aren't oversupplying or undersupplying anything. You are completely matched. Everybody who wants something is getting something, and everybody who's giving something is giving it away, right? That's the point where, the two lines cross over.
Are you saying that because the state... Well, okay, well, let me ask you this. How do you know the state oversupplied?
Because they subsidize it. So when there's a subsidy on something, more people than otherwise more means than otherwise, I should say, are going to be allocated towards that. Greater than or equal, if you're wanting to be precise about it.
And so because of that, you think the development of the COVID vaccine should have just
Been to free
allocated
market.
to market demand?
Yeah, whatever the market wants, do it.
Okay, but here's the thing. Like, obviously, the private sector has a lot of money, but people who cannot afford to invest in such a project, who aren't even familiar to the world of investing, which was a significant and
Like the
pertinent
state.
block, by the way. No. I'm talking about, like, individual citizens, people that weren't familiar in investing in government, or I guess pharmaceutical projects, or, like, didn't know how to go about sponsoring a COVID treatment. Like, that was a significant block. So it's just a philosophical bend that, like, the COVID vaccine could have, because COVID was the leading cause of death, it should have come out faster to prevent the deaths of people. Okay, like,
But
do you see
there
what
you
my
can be
point is?
deaths from other causes, right? So if you're allocating away from people who might save somebody on the highway, they're instead going towards figuring out a COVID vaccine, you might have more deaths that way. Because you can oversupply it. That's the point. You're oversupplying it. You're taking away from where the means really should be allocated to just this one thing. Right? Because you agree, though, you prevent COVID deaths if 100% of GDP was going towards stopping COVID deaths. You'd bring that number down quite easily, right? But that would be too much. We both agreed on this. Because it's an oversupply. And the correct amount is equilibrium. Do you agree on that?
Yes, but there are people that
Okay,
can't,
so
like,
therefore we
afford
want to
invest
tend
in
towards equilibrium. Do you agree?
what is, like, equilibrium? Is that the natural demand equilibrium?
That's when supply meets demand.
Demand aside from state
Yeah, because I don't think the
subsidies.
state subsidizing, that's a fake demand, right? It's not actually demand. I'm talking about what people actually want.
Okay, so if you're saying the state failed in properly allocating subsidies for a project like
No,
this,
I'm not
you're
talking
gonna
about
have to
them
prove
falsely
that they're...
allocating subsidies. I'm talking about subsidies qua subsidies are causing oversupplies. and undersupplies everybody else, everywhere else, I suppose, everywhere that's taxed at least.
Okay, so if this is the narrative, if you're getting at the fact that the state is bad at handling like who they fund and is just a bad institution in general in terms of economics, you're gonna have to prove that there would have been more deaths had we waited for the COVID vaccine to
I can prove that it's
sponsor
not what people
itself.
wanted, right? Because people might want to die, and there might be a suicide industry, and they help you commit suicide, and there'll be more deaths than otherwise, but people want to die. So I'm talking about what people actually want to happen. That's a far better metric here. So what people wanted to happen was equilibrium, by definition. What happened was something above equilibrium. That is not what people wanted. That's an oversupply. You're putting too much out there.
Well, so like I kind of got lost on that point. So you're saying, wow, I'm really lost. So, are like because the state went over equilibrium, you think that it's fundamentally not a good institution?
I think it's fundamentally not a good institution because it violates natural law. I think it fundamentally misallocated resources here because it's subsidized.
Okay, you're gonna have to prove that like it was a. So what do you mean by misallocation in this context?
Misallocation meaning not what the market wanted. It's like a malinvestment, basically, right? It's going to the wrong places. It means they're not being allocated as they should be allocated. Do you understand what I mean by means here?
Like materials and tangible items used to procure profit.
No.
Right? Is that what you mean by means?
Means are, I'm talking in the praxeologic sense, human action, right? So if I want to make a ham
Methods.
sandwich, a means towards making a ham sandwich might be me fucking walking over to the kitchen, right? And then getting out the ham and getting out the bread and putting them together. These are all means towards the end of having a ham sandwich. Which is probably in itself, eating a ham sandwich is probably a means towards the end of staying alive, right?
Yeah. So, like, are you saying the reason you think the state mismanages funding of actual projects is because they produce a surplus in terms of going over equilibrium?
It's because it's not voluntary, right? It's not actually what people are putting their own money up for and people are actually demanding. It's just the state has decided, hey, John over here, he probably wants a COVID vaccine. John's like, no, I don't. And then they just take John's money and put it towards a COVID vaccine. That is a misallocation of resources.
Oh, so you're saying like it's not consensual. That's why it needs to be.
Well, it's both.
I guess.
Like, it's the fact that it's not consensual means that it's an oversupply. Because they're just assuming what consumers want, taking their money by force, and putting it towards that, rather than just letting the consumers spend the money as they will.
I mean, I think like okay, having a state, there is a level of coercion, and like we're going off from the state police debate at this point, but I haven't decided whether taxation is voluntary or not. I'm leaning towards it being voluntary because of social contract theory, but like, and I'm not willing to debate this now. I'll have to explicate it on my own time sometime. But yeah, I think it's just and here's why I keep on bringing up philosophy. It's just a philosophical difference for us that I think state should exist, and I don't think a state should exist, because I tend to not think it's coercive, but even if it is coercive, it is a necessary, you know, violation of one's consent, to provide greater good. But yeah, I think that's just a fundamental difference in our thought. Yeah. But this was an enlightening discussion. You did elucidate some parts of the Ancap ideology for me, so that's great.
All right. So do you want to wrap up here then?
Yeah. I just think, going back to the original premise of this argument, the original, I guess, surprise debate topic, is that I think private institutions, completely privatized institutions in which the state doesn't even exist at all, which is Ancapistan, what Gregor is advocating for, are more corruptible than a check put on it, like some sort of intervening force in which markets can flow freely without being unethical. And I think the state, along with transparency into what the state is doing, is the best method to ensure, a just world, in my view. And I know that saying a just world is a very nuanced phrase, but yeah, that's just what I think. I hope I did better than... Oh my god, this guy's the worst. Fucking the loyalist. I hope I did
he's
better
stupid. He's retarded.
Wait, like, no, I should start calling him Elmer Fudd, because that is his definitive legal name at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's retarded. He was like... He did this, like, tanky sort of posturing in which he pretended to know all about theory, despite the fact that his claims were instantly falsifiable. Like, in an instant.
Because he didn't expect the fucking anarchist going into a monarchism debate to have read fucking Hoppe. What is wrong with him? Jesus Christ, you retard.
Like, was Hoppe an anarchist?
Hoppe's a big fucking anarchist. He's the student of Murray Rothbard. He's like the successor to Murray Rothbard. And like, this guy didn't fucking understand. He pretended to have read Hoppe.
Yeah. He also pretended to know about that, like, evictionism abortion concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, like tons of just posturing. And it was
just random shit as well.
Like, optics. Yeah, he was making up his ideology as he went along. And it was like such a huge opticus bomb for him to, one, not even go along with hypotheticals, despite the fact that his entire ideology is a hypothetical system, and two, to just like insult Justin and, call literally every one of the hosts a retard, despite the fact that he just told people he knew about theory. And don't worry, Elmer Fudd edit on the stream VOD, that was so fucking hilarious.
Yeah, you don't understand how I took so fucking long, like, tracing it to all the different, like, motion shit and everything. And like, I realized after I uploaded it, I was like, I probably should have faded this in so people actually realize that I edited that in. But it's kind of funny, the fact that, like, it's a little Easter egg that in my VOD it doesn't look like it's edited in at all. But if you watch the actual thing, it's completely edited in. You have to do a lot worse to get as bad as him. Holy shit, that guy's retarded.
But yeah, like, I think it was so well edited to the point where I actually got this, like, Mandela effect, and like, I thought about checking the original VOD.
Yeah.
Like, it was well edited, I'll give you that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, like, it was such a you're welcome. It's such a stupid move for him to, like, reject the entirety of the use of hypotheticals and to just call the hosts fucking retards. And he did it so much to the point, he was so unabashed about it, to the point where even Justin was like going, flawless victory.
Yeah.
And like the VOD closed out with him with Todd saying like, "Hope harder," and he was trying to say, "Shut the fuck up!" All these pejoratives, like
Yeah.
he was trying to think of so desperately trying to think of a comeback to like the insults you threw at him.
Yeah.
To
Oh
the
my
point
god.
where he just pulled the Uno reverse card.
That one was so good.
Oh my God.
That one's gonna be my favorite one yet. That was so fucking easy.
Yeah. So fantastic. Yeah, this has been a very good discussion.
Yeah, it's been good.
I hope to talk to you again. Yeah.
Yeah,
I might
anytime,
make
mate.
a lot of progress soon. Yeah. Anytime. Thank you.
Yep, I'll see you, I guess, when I ever see you then.
Yeah.
See ya. Good debate, boys. Got another one in the bag, I think. Yeah, it was pretty fun. We got to rag on the loyalists at the end there as well. That's always a good time. I suppose this is it, eh? I'll see you guys the next time, I suppose. Yeah, indeed, it has been entertaining, Connell. You're right. And then I just jump up an extra concurrent viewer right at the end there. Alright, I'll see you guys.